Tēnā rā e pā e tō mātai matua nui te rangi. Te iehua atua ariki. Tēnā nā e whakaaro nui ana nā e mahara nui ana nā i a tātai mātai i ngā wā katoa ai te ao, ai te pō. Noho mai ai rā kia tātai mātai i ngā wā katoa. Me te whai haere i te āroha roha ki te mea. Whai haere i te whakaaro nui ki te mea. Whakarungo ake atu ki ngā rongorongo whakaaro, ngā kare āroto te aha. O roto i a mātau i tēne mea te tānga tangata. Putanua. Tēnā rā i ngā tangi o te wā e pā. Kia tau mai tō whakaaro nui i ngā mamae, ngā pāpūritanga o te wā. Kia tangihia mai rā ano hia me mātau e kōkoe me tō kaha ātatau tiaki, kaha ātatau mana, ki kaha ātatau whakarahi mai anuai. Ki tēnā. Ai roto i ngā, i tēnā mea no o te tangihanga, i rā mea katoa no i ngā Aituaa, i ngā Parekura o te wā, putanua te ao, putanua te motu, putanua te rohe wenua. Ia tātou mātau e pā e tō mātau matua nui te rangi e. Ai te ingoa te iehua, mene ka piti hono ka tātai hono ko rātou mā tērā e kōrero hia ke atuana. Ko rātou mā tērā karere noa tua noai ki tio te ārai o te mate. E nā rokohanga noa ke atu i roto i ngā wā tata kene. I ngā rā tata kene. Hoi anō, putanua. Kia mihi a koutou, kia tangihia, kia poroporo a kītia. Haere whakau tiatu ki te pō nui, te pō roa, te pō tiatu. Ki te tatau o te pō, ki wharaurangi, kia hine nui o te pō. Haere ake atura. A ka apiti hono, ka tātai hono, ka tātou mātonu anō tēnei tātou, te kānuhi ora ki a tātou mātau. Kai te mihi atu, nau mai haere anō rā tātou, kua hurike mai nei roto i ngā mea katoa nō o te rā. Kia hatia, kia tau mai anu ai ki roto ki ngā kōrero o te wā, ki roto ki ngā āhuatanga katoa i ngā WhakataungaKereeme, kia Tahumaakaakanuimatua. E hana te aha i roto i te taunahanahatanga o roto Tahumaakaakanuimatua. Ki te motu, hoi anō, ki roto ki Wairarapa ki Tararua o te matau a MeaE nira, e no reira. Hara mai, nau mai haere, nau mai piki, kake, hara mai, kai te mihi atu, tēnā rā tātou, mauri ora. Kahuri. Kia ora, yes, back again, te ariki matua kāea. Back into the kōrero, back into the updates. Just to get through the update real quickly on settlements, that deal, that forthcoming deal from the Crown, the talks to start and finish in the finalisation of everything with the Crown. That's indeed, I mean, we're starting to think that actually, it's more about where the Kahungunu are situated now, because what we're starting to think is that the hold-up is not the Crown, but the actual Kahungunu, in terms that I mean, not only do we have the crisis in the north there, you know, from Marangai Ka, Meha Gabriel, but we also have, prior to that, the Kahungunu situation, which finds itself in a situation, I mean, Select Committee and the House of Representatives made that clear in December last year, that the situation was by where, you know, and they blame the Crown, and rightfully so. Most of the stuff is Crown orientated. Most of the stuff is due to the authoritarian dictatorship, and we've got a wee bit of that to come. We've got some specifics that we're going to focus on today, but I'll just get through this update now. Where the hold up, we believe, is an actual fact. How the settlement for the Kahungunu is going to go down. We don't believe ours is so difficult, so complicated, so complex to be able to get through, because ours is straightforward. I mean, we are of the entirety of Whakatapu ki TTI o te Moteo Maori. It doesn't really matter which lands are Kahungunu, which lands are Rangitane. The good thing about it all is that both those tribes have now, what it seems like, you know, they're now round down to exactly what is their, you know, what is their rightful claim, and where their true rights and interests are. We're going to get a wee bit more into that later on, but we can't really depend on their claims to population. I mean, if you look at the differences between their claims to population and ours, and then you look at where we situate all the numbers, then you begin to understand why, and the complications and complexities that apply to the Crown process in the whole scheme of things. Okay, so yeah, getting right into it today, getting right into everything. We do not have what people think a straightforward settlement does for the Kahungunu. Because no doubt some of their people would be arguing some of those lands, some of the ownerships. All they really need to do is go back to the original lines of ancestry descent of each of those tribes that they took mandate over in 2012 with the Crown, illegally too, I might add, but they used the authoritarian dictatorship of the Crown with which to be able to do that. And yeah, okay, rightfully so, you can do that, but whilst you know that those areas are challenged, and whilst you know that actually it's highly likely that we were correct, we have the correct whakatapu according to those ancestries and not them. And we made that clear at the end of last year. You know, Hami, in our talks at the end of last year, at the end of 2022, he was pretty adamant that their whakapapa is absolutely not up to scratch. Why? Because they have so much difficulty. It's frustrating, it's confusing how you put most of the tables they've had real trouble, real difficulty with. What I didn't bring up with him was a lot of the tables and that they stole from us, that they weren't allowed to use. And they were amidst all the evidence that we gave them to prove our claim in 2009. It was after that the Kahungunu and the Rangitane went straight to the Crown. Went to te tangiweto, you know, as I put it then, and I won't be changing it because that's exactly what they did. They went there, you know, basically we had them beat. You know, kiki kumu mātau, you know, and we went out to do that. We were out to unite. That's all we were out to do. And they didn't see it as that. They saw it, you know, that they had a sore bum. they had been kicked. And so they went running to the Crown, you know, devised a way forward from there, basically got babied by the Crown. And this is one of the problems with the whole of the process. The Crown will baby who they see as traditional LNG in the space, according to their grand narrative. The problem with that is that the grand narrative is a crock of, hamuti. And the other thing is that when it comes to the claims of the Kahungunu, most of their ancestries, in fact, over 2/3 of their ancestries are not theirs. Okay, so we need to keep those things in mind as we go through the kōrero today. Aroha mai, as we meander through the kōrero today, and we have a good time talking around some of the stuff we've got in today, mostly due to questioning and a lot of feedback that we get as a result of our kōrero and us putting our kōrero out there. It's good because it jogs people's thoughts. It makes people think about, because a lot of the things that we bring to the space are the stuff that no one else wants to talk about. And that's the truth. That's what we do. That's all we do. We bring the truth. We bring the facts. And not only that, but, he tātai kawa o te kōrero, a mātou. Nō mātou tērā. Nō mātou anō tērā. He tātai kawa o te kōrero. We bring all the facts and figures. That's us. That's us. And because it's kōrero, they're not hearing from anybody else. They've always got questions, and, there's big question marks because, their understanding is suddenly challenged, or their understanding is suddenly expanded somewhat or lateralized somewhat as a result of what we've shared. So we get a lot of questioning now. Organised for today, next up after the update, I had organised kōrero around the ex-whānau, because a lot of kōrero came up around there, around ex-whānau and stuff like that, and the sorts of challenges that are still there with the ex-whānau and stuff like that. And I think that relates to basically a lot of what I spoke about in terms of the spiritual. Let's not get too hung up on that. It's no big deal. It's no big deal. And I talked about things to do with the spiritual in relation to Gabriel, te marangai ka meha nei, and in relation to where it directly targeted to hammer the biggest and the most. And basically, when you look at it, they were really the only ones hammered in the country. In the whole of a country, if you're the only ones hammered, things like that are conjured. And when you're someone who has a very strong ability, if you're gifted in things spiritual, and you have those sorts of, you have the ability to communicate or know, or that the atuatuatanga tend to communicate through you as a medium, then, and I do all my stuff through the Lord now. I don't necessarily, like I used to do, I don't necessarily go straight to tūturutanga because there's no need to now. Straight through the Lord, things become easier. Things are still tūturu, but things become a lot easier and a lot more manageable. But yeah, that's a whole other story. And we're still up. We're still on to the update, by the way. But I'm just going into the lots of kōrero that we've got today. But the spiritual I spoke about is only one small part of a whole raft of things that you've got to take care of. But I brought up those two major take, because those are the major kōrero of the atuatuatanga. If there's anything, kai te ririrahu ki rā tau, ngā atuatuatanga kia e rā wāhi, ko te mea o te karakia, me te rerekuri o te karakia, me te whakarere, haere noa nei, pukanua. Karakau I te whakahaere tia I te whakamāhea ke atu, ki roto ki tēnei mea te tikanga, ki tēnei mea te tika, te tautika, putatia no rahuki ki te kawa. Kare anō I mea tonu hoki I ēnā mea katoa ki roto ki a ēnā mea e tino tika ana kia mea I te karakia. Koe te pai, tuarua, nā, he mea e, ne? No raro o te rōra, no roto I te wāhi tonu nei, te kōkori tonu nei I te ao nei, o te pena hapu, karakau te tika nei, te whakahaeretia. Ki roto ki ngā uri, ngā hapu le tārewa o I nā rohe. Karakau I te tika, te whakahaere o I nā mea, I te nuinga meki, I te nuinga eta, e rā no te mea, Kai te pai? So, those are the major things, but I centered on the TahaWairua because that's your priority, that's your most critical. And sometimes, in most cases, that's the toughest part. And that's why I just wanted to mention that part, because that says it all, really, too, as well. And what I just mentioned there was the corrupted use of karakia. Most of the time, karakia is being used outside of the law. Most of the time, karakia is being used derogatively, and those are a couple of the worst areas for that. Okay? Those are the concerns we picked up from the atuatuatanga during our times of prayer over Gabriel. Well, we're pretty wrapped with how things are going at the moment up there. The recovery is coming along fine. Obviously, they need a lot more ringa, raupa, wai, kakama no hoki, ki reira, you know, they need a lot more hands on deck and feet. But, you know, generally, things are going fine up there. But hey, I te taha ki te wairua ka tika ngā mea katoa. Te tangata, whakarite mea nuai I ngā mea katoa, hei whai atu, ki roto ki te taha ki te wairua ki aia. Kua tino rite mai anuai, kua tino te tuki pai mai anuai, ngā mea katoa hei whai. Okay, so, and I said that last week too, you know, when you tend to your spirituality or your spiritual side of you, you know, everything tends to go right for you. Everything tends to settle down and everything tends to, I mean, kaputa mai te ara tika ki a koe, te ara tau tika. And so you have, and I'm not joking, and those are the words of our old people, of my old people, or the words of wisdom, some of those words of wisdom that they've shared with me. When you tend to that spiritual side, ana, ko tērā. When you don't, ana, roko hanga noa ake atu, ko ia ko tērā. He Aituaa, he Parekura, he haere ana. Haere noa e rā mea I roto I au wawa. Okay? So whilst you haven't tended to your spiritual, be aware. Be aware that things like this can happen suddenly. You know, sudden destruction comes, sudden, crises and what have you, tragedies come upon people at those times. You know, they're drawn to you. And, you know, such is the wisdom too of our Lord. You know, and I shared that too last week. Our Lord, just slightly different, This is coming from te taha ki kia Tahumaakaakanuimatua to our Tutura side. And remember, like I've always said to you, they're not exactly the same, but there are some similarities and parallels, okay? And, so we've come a long way in the settlement. So we've actually settled down. We've started to relax, and that's where we're up to there. but just mentioning some of the kōrero there. And don't make too much of a big thing of te taha ki te wairua, because it's not. It's not. All it takes is just to be tended to. Put things right, in other words. Start to put things right. You know, if you're not utilising karakia right, then put that right. Or give them away altogether. Okay? If you're finding that you're working within a corrupted space, fix it up. You know, things like that. That's what we're talking about there. You know, and like me, 5 years ago, I joined the Christian faith. You know, that was a big step for me on my journey towards tending to my TahaWairua. Okay? That doesn't mean to say that I always was meant to, but what that does say, and what a lot of my Christian whānau have discussed with me, and some of their thinking around that, why so late in my life have I ended up a Christian, that some of the great words of wisdom from them has been that e tatauma, you know what, I was never meant to until now. Okay? Because I had lots of regrets back when I first started coming into Christianity. I had no confidence, you know. And that's usually me with something new. I don't like to go in, you know, with a real cocky attitude. And I've never been that sort of person anyway, where something is real utterly brand new to me. So I tend to take my time. I tend to tread carefully, and I tend to and I always am quite humble, just actually as I get along. And actually people think that my humility is probably my problem, because I end up too humble sometimes, and you know, in some instances. But I tend to become more outspoken, more confident, and move a lot more freely within the space the longer time goes on. But I'm never cocky, never a person that is overconfident or anything like that. So, and then I start to be able to use whatever leadership potential I can bring to whatever space that I am able to and am given an opportunity to play a part in. Okay, so yeah, but that is a big part of talks today. Yeah, things have to be put right in those areas, and they had to be before Gabriel. And I mainly said that because hopefully they focus on that for after Gabriel. They're just in some areas up there, up in Hawke's Bay, coming up to the rebuild. So they're getting through recovery pretty well, and rebuild is coming up in some areas. And probably they would be very soon after this week, probably most areas would be into the rebuild. So I'm quite happy. Things are going really well. There's lots of hands on deck. Everyone's in. Everyone's coming from everywhere and all around the world. And so that's really good to see. And so our prayers are being answered, and everything is falling into place. You know, yeah. So they were some of the words of wisdom shared by my ancestors and shared by my old people, my koroua, in the past, you know, that is number one, and it just tended to be a lot of what the Aituaa were talking about during that rough time for those areas, that we could pick up from them, is that in a lot of those corrupted areas, usually due to te taha ki te wairua, because that's the root of everything. That's the root of everything. And most of the damage done to our people over the years has been at the spiritual level. Okay? At the spiritual level, that's where most of the damage is. So we tend to make bad decisions due to that. Okay? Now, so I thought I'd mention all that because some of that came up, some of the kōrero on that, and just I think some people are overthinking it, so they need not because it's no big deal. But one of the things that my old people, my korua, have said to me is you tend to that spiritual side, you get that right, you get that settled, and you get that at peace. Yeah. Everything else will fall into place in your life. Yeah. That's where it is. Like, for instance, let me give an example. I've been taking a good look at some of the kōrero from the hearings of the gangs, you know, the abuse and state care. Oh, look at all the, healing is part of it. You know, healing from past hurts and reconciling with people that you've always had problems with. And that's where my ex-whānau was going to come in today. But I'm going to save that. I'm going to save that for next week because we've got lots to get through this week and I just wanted to cut it down to 3. So the other part that I wanted to bring in instead today is on the Kahungunu Rangitane, okay, and the political situation for us as it goes at the moment. Because I think politically we're at a little bit of a crossroads in the settlements, and because they've been really put in their place in the last couple of years, they've been absolutely put in their place, Kahungunu. They've had to compromise. The Crown has had to compromise. So they've been through a lot. And that's why we're getting the sort of the lull in the space and in the settlement space at the moment, if I can call it that. I don't mean they're up to anything. I don't mean, you know, there's more corrupt stuff going on or we could expect more corrupt stuff, because I don't think so. Because I think if we do get that, they're not going to like the Whakatapu if we turn it right up to full power. Okay? And it could be, it could not be, it could be quite devastating, you know? It could be quite devastating. But I think once we do turn it up, they'll go on to the other side of things and they'll totally comply. The other thing is, I think, you know, tuarua, I think they'll start to correspond and communicate with us on that whakatapu to see how they can get it turned down. And 3, I think at the end of the day, they'll look to get it lifted. Okay? I wouldn't be too confident that it wouldn't be devastating either way. Okay, that's where I stand on that, if we have to turn up that whakatapu. Very dangerous if you're the perpetrator that's caused a whakatapu like this to be laid. I mean, they are our lands. We are the only tribe, rightfully, that whakapapa to all these lands. Kahungunu isn't. You know, they've been made to look at through the grand narrative, and hence, you know, they're the big deal today. You know, lots of questions came up around that. So we thought we'll clarify a lot of things around questions that and statements made to us as a result of our kōrero over the last 3 weeks. And so, we're going to touch on the political situation. And it's been like that for a long time. And Kahungunu Rangitane have manipulated it as such for a long time. Not continuously, not consistently, but just when they've been able to do that. And at times when they've needed to be babied, you know, by the Crown. And they're always getting that. I mean, you know that. That's the only reason they're surviving this. Otherwise, they were goners. And they've been goners around 6 times. This is the 7th. You know, we're coming up to settlements. And they're total goners after settlements. Let's face it. They're taken back to perspective. They haven't got anything anywhere near what they first claimed. And what they were first claiming was rights to the entire of this region of Wairarapa ki Tararua te Matau a Māori. And lo and behold, here we come. We come in and we give everybody the bad news that that's actually not the case. Okay? that that's actually not the case. Karakau ia rātau te taunahanaha ki e nei whenua. Okay, ki e nei rohe whenua. Kia wairarapa ki tararua o te mataua māwi. Putātu anō hoki ki roto he re taunga rarau te wairua. Karakau. Hara ia Kahungunu, hara ia Rangitane. Okay, and so, yeah, we're getting right down to the nitty-gritty, and where Kahungunu are trying to organise themselves around the settlements. They're in a tough situation. I know that it'll be hard for some of their people. They've got to think of us, though. You know, we've been a long time trying to get ourselves in a situation and with conditions that are suitable for us to settle. Once we got there, we moved in, we got in, we have been working our butts off, you know, to absolutely get settlement done. We think we've done enough now. We think we've done enough. And if I can put it that way, we can feel the lull. And hopefully the whole of our communities can feel the lull in the space. Why? Because they've got to be talking around it, and you know, it's a new thing for them. It's new ground. It's breaking ground. You know, just like the abuse and state care, all of that is, you know, it's new ground for all those people. You know, all the gangs coming together and stuff like that. That's good to see. For people, for leaders like me, we like to see things like that, because that's how we were, Tutura, you know. We weren't, you know, we didn't go all out to you know, we weren't that silly. You know, we actually, at the end of the day, we needed each other to survive. Hey, so we were around the other way. We weren't always looking at each other as enemies and looking to see how much we could beat up the other. That's not the case. That's not the case for our tribes. Our tribes were always looking for ways that we can better correspond, better communicate, better live together, work together, without damaging our independence, without, you know, we were totally interdependent of each other, without trampling each other's lands, each other's mana, and each other's tapu. Okay? And with all due respect to status and primacy and preeminence, all those sorts of things. Okay? Now, what Kahungunu and Rangitane don't understand is that what we have here is a total takatakahi of ours. Yeah, that's what's been happening here. And that's why we've been so angry and so hurt right through this whole thing, is that as soon as they moved to run under the crown and tangiweto to the crown and get babied by the crown, ka takatakahi rawa hia ake atu ia mata. Okay? And, you know, we hurt. We've been hurting deep right through. Then add to all that, āpiti atu ki e nā mea, āpiti atu, you know, ngā mea katoa rā. You know, our own children being put through abusive situations, our own people, threats to our survival as an iwi, all those sorts of things. They're not very nice when you're any other tribe. But when you're the most senior, and when you're the primacy, the preeminence and the prominence of the region, and in fact, you are the legal possessor of the rohe whenua, you know, that's so much, that's much more besides. Okay, so it's been really, really tough and really, really stressful, really frustrating and really difficult. And then you look at our mana tapu in the land. You know, we're from the most senior in the land, one of the most powerful iwi. To have come through right back to the earliest days of the establishment of our nation over 1,000 years ago. That's where we come from. That's where we are at, and we grew to be one of the largest tribes. And even today, we're one of the largest tribes of the Moteo. Mind you, we could be the largest yet, but I don't know. It depends how in future things go with MeaE Hapu. It's difficult to tell with MeaE Hapu. But we make it that it's MeaE Hapu, traditionally, that are the largest tribe in the country. But we'll see how it goes, because we know all the descendants of MeaE. And we've studied a lot of kōrero around them, a lot of kōrero around our reo. You know, and that's one of the greatest characteristics, the greatest traits of our people, and the giftings of our iwi. You know, the reo is one of the biggest ones, you know, one of the major ones, one of the primary ones. And the thing is that when you're working with the reo, you're working with perhaps the oldest taonga of all of them. And it's the one taonga of all the taonga you can work. I mean, there's lots and lots of other taonga we work with as well. You know, like tikanga, like law, traditional law, you know, te tūtaua, you know, all those sorts of things. Enforcing the law, you know, pena hapu, whakapapa kōrero, all those different taonga. And then there's a lot of the physical taonga, you know, working with all those different areas is very, very helpful in terms of being archaeological, in terms of being, you know, in terms of areas of anthropology, ethnology, ethnography, all those different areas of study, the study of physicians, you know, all those sorts of people, physicists, rock, you know, geologists, and all those sorts of people. You know what? All those areas, none of them to us surpass the reo. And the thing is with the reo, if you've been able to retain the reo as well as we have, and we're talking right around the world, over thousands of years, our reo has been preserved from over thousands of years. And it hasn't always been like that. We've had our reo preserved when we first started from perhaps over 1,000, but now we go back a lot further. You know, we're thousands and thousands of years now. And the thing when you're working with the reo, I mean, it's different if you're talking from a crown point of view and crown processes and all those sorts of things. I mean, we've never cared too much for any of that because they don't matter. They're just what, you know, the authoritarian dictator. Well, they don't matter to us, but it's just what the authoritarian dictatorship of the crown makes us do and makes us submit to. And we've always been that one iwi that we always tell the crown what we will submit to and what we won't. Or another, no, not submit, that's the wrong word. What we will do and what we won't, yeah. What we are happy with and what we're not happy with. We've always been that one iwi that does that. And yeah, so with settlement, we're just waiting for the deal to come. That's really all that there is, and whatever time they need, we're going to lead them to have that time. Let things be there and just await for that to come. So whenever it comes, it comes. I mean, it could happen tomorrow. It could happen next week. It could happen the week after. But whenever it comes, we'll let you all know. Otherwise, we're going to push on. So that's our second kaupapa today, the Kahungunu Rangitane and the political situation, because politically things are very, very, they've come to a point where perhaps a part of the Kahungunu is starting to challenge that political situation for Kahungunu at the moment. And for some of them, perhaps it feels like they're giving away too much or having to give away too much. They wouldn't know. They wouldn't know, those people that are challenging that and feel that they're giving away too much, but they're actually not giving away anything. They don't realise that, but they're not giving away anything. What they're doing is giving back everything that they should not have had in the first place. Everything that they acquired, according to the grand narrative, they need to give back and keep only what's theirs. Yeah. Okay? Because if we go right back to their beginning of work within the space, which is 50 years, 60 years prior to us coming into the space, and we've only been in it going on 27 years now. You know, if we go back 50 to 60 years when they first started, everything came under the Crown and what the Crown had organised in the space, and it all depended on the grand narrative. And then people like us came in. The last 5 major groups, and that included 4 of the primary iwi of the country. And that includes MeaE Hapu, Teawa Hapu, Tahumaakaakanuimatua, Hapu, Nui Tonu Te Tārewarane. Not Nawe, but the next one after that is Moriori Hapu. Okay, so there's your 4. And we came in, we challenged the whole establishment. Okay? We brought together all the evidence that was going to smash the whole of the grand narrative to bits. Now, what's happening in the space is something of what we're going to talk about today. This is why it doesn't seem like we've done that, but we have. We actually have. We've smashed it to pieces. And that's what's happened. And we're trying to keep the opposition in a realistic headspace, because at the moment they tend to get driven away by the politics. It's the politics in this sort of space. And that includes within the settlement space. There's a lot of politics. And we've got to be careful how we play that politics, because when we don't play it right, the Crown wins. See, and this is the thing with Kahungunu Rangitane that we've never liked, because they've always gone the way where the Crown wins. You know why? Because to them, when the Crown wins, they win. See? That's what it always seems like. But they're not going to win this time doing that. They're going to lose. Okay? And that's the reality they have before them at the moment. Quite a different reality today, because we've set up things in a way where tūturutanga is going to have the last say. And that's right. That's how it should have always been. But none of the other iwi were onto it prior to us coming into the space. Okay? And let's not forget there are only 7 primary iwi of the country. 1, MeaE Hapu. 2, Teawa Hapu. 3, Tahumaakaakanuimatua, Hapu, Nui Tonu Te Tārewa. 4, Nawe, Hapu, Nui Tonu Te Tārewa. 5, Moriori Hapu, and that included the Māori and the Maui, who were also part of them, and all part of MeaE Hapu, who were some of the first people of the land, including some of the Teawa, the most senior of the Teawa, and also the most senior of Tahumaakaakanuimatua. Okay, some of the first people of the land. And the other part of it is the Hapu. The other iwi, primary iwi of the country, are the Hapu. This is from Tuakana to Teina, Hapu, and of course, lastly but not least, Te Atiawa Nui no Ringaterangi. Okay? So there's your 7 primary iwi. Why? Because we know we studied all of their taiopuru, we studied all of their ariki, and they're the most senior and the most ranked in the land. Okay? Their waka confederations spell out all of their hapu ne tārewa. They spell out the mana of their ariki in the land, and also in, when you trace them back to Hawaiki nui, Hawaiki rua, Hawaiki pā māmā, Hawaiki tawhiti. For us, in Raiatea Tahiti, we have studied all our people that came from those areas around the islands of Tahiti. And for us in particular is Raiatea. And I think for Awa and Te Atiawa Nui no Ringaterangi in particular is Raiatea. And they have strong ties as well to Rapanui. We are tied into, of course, the most senior Tapu Aotea and Rangitane. We're part of the most senior there as well. And then we are also part of the other side, the eastern areas of Rangitane as well, where we were not just, we say that we were the ariki of Te Kura because you always had our overlord. Institutions like that in traditional times, the Whare Wānanga was a place where chieftains governed over everything that went through there. Everything that came through the Whare Wānanga was governed over by the arikitanga. And so they were governed, controlled, managed everything that went through there. So we weren't just the Ruanuku and Ruarangi, the tohunga and the ruahine that ran the Whare Wānanga, Te Kura, but we basically were it. Okay? And when we're talking about Te Kura, we're talking about Te Kura, the most renowned of Pacifica, connected with Samoa. Tutura for us, Western Samoa there, connected with Hawaii, MeaE for us, connected with Western Samoa, and also TongaTapu, connected in those areas too. Vanuatu, Fiji, Melanesia, all those areas. And of course, we've got connections too with Rarotonga, but they're very junior connections from us. So, but they're still very vital in telling the story. I mean, we can't tell all the story about seniorities and then forget all the juniorities as well. You can't do that because you only get part of the story then. So you've got to tell the full story. So the problem that we've had in the space is that we haven't been able to tell the full story because we've been restricted so much by the Crown and the grand narrative. Okay? Now, what happens in the politics is that the Crown can always control above the ground. Okay? They can always control what's above the ground and how that runs and basically how that's governed over. And not only do they control that, but they dictate it. And in times like these, because we've challenged to smash their whole grand narrative apart, what's actually taking place is that the Crown is sort of floundering about, but then they get these junior groups like Kahungunu, Rangitane come in, and because they know they can win if they go on the Crown side, they put the Crown back into the top spot. See, and that's what happens here. And that's why it's important for us, and it's important for all those people that question that area, when we spoke about the Kahungunu of Heretaunga Te Wairua, and what we talked about communicating with them about the atiatuatanga and their kōrero, about what's happening there at the moment. This is their kōrero. And I don't think the atiatuatanga would be inaccurate about that. Okay, and that's a lot of what we've brought to the space. We've brought exactness, we've brought accuracy, we've brought preciseness, and we've brought things so particular and so precise that, the future generations cannot go wrong as a result of that. Okay? They might expand a wee bit in future, but we don't think they can go wrong by any great degree. If they do, there will be small degrees, and they'd be easy to put right. But we don't think so. We don't think so. And we say that because we think groups like Kahungunu, Rangitane might always challenge that space, but they don't know. Our iwi, Tahumaakaakanuimatua, has things so together, they'll always have an answer for them, eh? They'll always have a response. And they'll always be able to set them right. So we don't think if it so be that once settlements comes, that rightfully we get to settle right across our whenua here, right across TahaWairua. I mean, we've got the north to think about yet. We've got the rest of the areas of the east to think about yet. We've got the rest of our western aukati. And we quite like how we're doing in the western aukati, because in most areas everybody's pretty comfortable with us. We've got such a great rapport with everybody around these areas now in the west, because we've been working from the We've been working from the west right from the word go, and it's because that's where our tupuna ended up, our seniors, from the north to the south. From the north, some went east, some went south. The huge majority went south. We started to people the south, and then we slowly left a lot of our uri there. A lot of our uri in the east, a lot of our uri in the north, and ended up mainly inhabiting in the west. And rightfully so, because we're a western tribe, western in originality in terms of where we come from, in terms of Rangitane, Tahiti. Even though it's an island, not well known for being a part of Eastern Polynesia and Central Polynesia, Central Pacifica. It's also on the island of Rangitane, we were particularly associated with the West, but then we also had lines and connections in the East, as you well know. And so, e tatauma, yeah. Good to understand all those sorts of things. So that's really, really important for us to talk about today. So we'll put the ex-whānau on hold. That's where a lot of those things that... is there much to reconcile there? I don't think so. I just want to say that. I just want to share that. So it's not going to be, heavy like we did last year when we wanted to deal with things ex whānau, and, there's not going to be responses to challenges and stuff like that. I'm just going to talk around some of the take there and why I have already decided not to return to that whānau. Reconciliation's fine. Forgiveness is fine. But there's a couple of major reasons why I won't return there. Oh, well, maybe three major ones. One, that is the simple fact that once you go back into a whānau like that, you're expected to, if there's still Kahungunu, and there's still mob, there's big question marks as to whether I should be there. Because I'm going to be, whichever way we look at it, even if we've reconciled, even if we've got forgiveness there, you're still going back into the same old situation. You know what that says to people like that? What that says is, we can do the same again in future too then. That should be fine. We can get away with this. And that's what some people think. Although sorries can be had, they think, we can do wrong, cause a lot of pain in that, and then we can say sorry. And that's it. Cool, we've gotten away with that. It's all over now. Now, some other take comes up in future and away they go again. They do it again. This is the problem with whānau like that. And this is why I've said to you in the past that this particular whānau has forgotten how to be whānau. This is what their biggest problem is. And they're too gang and too overly influenced by the tūhoe side of our whānau. Okay, and that's what the biggest problem is. There, in a nutshell, is your problem. It's probably not so much the gangs. It's the tūhoe. The tūhoe have had too much of a say in the mobster side of the whānau. And they've actually put them wrong, and they haven't even seen that yet. Yeah, what if that were different? Well, big questions there, because I've already accepted the most senior line in the region. If they think I'm going to change that, just because they might change their spots and say, You know, we might be mob and black, you know, and things like that. They, you know, they don't realise, even though very admirable moves like that, and change from Kahungunu and accept Tahumaakaakanuimatua, very admirable things like that. But if they're going to expect me to reverse out of my position and expect Tahumaakaakanuimatua to reverse out of its position and what it's built and grown and developed in the space to date, they're wrong about that. And it would be to protect all of that why I would stay in there and still stay out of that whānau. I see a lot more good in that rather than going back to the whānau. They don't realise this is, it's probably a lot better for their whānau if I didn't. Okay? Because politically I stand a lot more stronger and more accountably and very, very tough and very, very... Actually, I'm probably going to be the fiercest debater in terms of politically. They won't like me. Let me put it that way. They won't like me. When it comes to politics, nowadays, I'm a fierce competitor in that area. Very, very fierce. Because we have to fight hard. We have to fight hard. You know, what this has taught me this whole 27 years is that we haven't been fighting hard enough. You know? We haven't been fighting hard enough. We've got to get in there and make sure the job is done. Now, we've got to stop pissing around. We've got to stop being too soft. We could be, you know, said to have been too soft in the past. Well, that's not the case. You know, you get into the political arena with me and you'll see how hard I actually am. Okay? And politically, you got no chance. If you're standing on the wrong side of me in politics, you're out of there. And you're out of there pretty quick. Okay? Because it's a pretty ruthless space, that politics. And this is why politics is such a big thing today, and the political situation for us today. The other thing for that whānau is that, once things have you know, they think it's an invitation for more later on. The other thing is that the second thing is that as soon as you walk in there, you're accepted as a kahungunu and a mob, and actually I'm neither. Okay, neither is my whānau. Okay? My whānau in these areas are tahu. And that's that. We're the primary iwi of these areas, not Kahungunu. Kahungunu doesn't even, you know, equal Tahumaakaakanuimatua, so neither should they be put on the same plane. Just because the Crown dictates all of that stuff and keeps everything Crown above the ground to say that they are, the simple reality of the matter is that they're not. Okay, so Kahungunu is an uri, and that's where Kahungunu needs to remain. Okay? So the iwi here is tahu. And so my whānau is tahu. When we walk in there, I mean, we might have some people saying that they're kahungunu uri, fine with us. Then they're kahungunu uri of the waitaha rangi hapu TeTaiRawhitiAukatiTai. Okay, that's who they are. And you know waitaha rangi hapu TeTaiRawhitiAukatiTai. They're ours. They're our 10th line TeTaiRawhitiAukatiTai from Tahumaakaakanuimatua. So be rest assured that whether the Crown wants to exaggerate everything and continue to over exaggerate everything with their grand narrative, and for Kahungunu as well, will bring them down to the ground in perspective, right down to where they belong, as the uri that they are in reality. Okay? And that's the way it's going to get. You know, just because we're sitting up here and we're starting to settle and everything's going to settle down, this is not where we get complacent and we sit back on our haunches, on our laurels and say, oh, the job's done, because no, it's not. That's when we get up and start to do some work. Okay, that's when the work begins. And so if their whānau wouldn't survive in the political arena with me, as peaceful as it might be, I'll just put it nicely in a peaceful way, and you'll still get knocked over by me. Because politically, it ain't going to be a nice place. Okay? And so, yeah, they're you know, and in reality, I'm not going to like walking into their place. If anything, if they need to have anything to do with me or my whānau, they will need to come into our space, where we feel safe, and where we accept them wholeheartedly, and where we can help them to feel safe, etc., etc., etc. We don't have this gang mentality that we place all over everybody that comes in there. We don't have this Kahungunu, overly exaggerated mentality from the Crown, and we don't have this Tuhoe recolonised outfit that is totally remodeled the thinking from a colonised thinking to a recolonised thinking of Tuhoe, where things are operated from and where things are organised around as well. Okay? And when you're fighting against politics that come from areas like that, you need to be very, very, very articulate and very, very strong. And I mentioned to you before, front foot politics, that was the way of our tūpuna. I mentioned that to you before, that was the way of our tūpuna. Look, I mean, use it to every ounce of the advantage that you can get it to. And I tell you, because this is my area to operate in politically, I'm going to smash everybody in our way politically, right from when we settle. Because everyone is going to, if you can't handle it, you're going to have to move over. Okay, and that's how tough it's going to get. Because we're going to make it that way, and because that's where the job begins, e tatauma. Once we get settlement, once our iwi know who they are, once we start to get hold on the governance of our people, I mean, the fight hasn't been had. The fight hasn't been had. You know? Everything's just started. That's really where it is. The fight is yet to come. I mean, how much are the Crown going to try and resist us as times come? And that brings me to, as times roll on and progress, and that brings me to the final part, e tatauma, of our kōrero today, and that is with TTI, the use of te reo in TTI, 1840, and the fraudulent way in which that was utilised. We're moving that forward as of this week. They will be moved forward. One of the things we actually want to do is charge them. We want to charge them for the whole of the account. You know, this is going right back to 1840. Right from that fraudulent time, that very first lot of signings, all those ancestries were fraudulated. Okay, needless to say that, you know, all the rest were fraudulated as well, you know, so, but they weren't so fraudulated as the initial ones. Okay? So, it's going to be a heavy case now, whether we just take it straight to court or whether we actually take it through, you know, police prosecution and enforcement, and make it a part of the investigation, which I think we should. I actually think we should. And be absolutely tough on the Crown. And I think we have to be, because they're going to want to get out of this. They're going to look for any way possible to try and get off. And they're not going to, because this is, we believe, too well evidence. They fraudulated our tūpuna out of the ability to assume sovereignty still. They took that over. They took that over 6 months after the signing of the treaty. And, took out the power of our seniority straight after, within the years immediately after. Coming up to 1851, 52, 53, those vital years that saw seniorities fall down everywhere in the country. And you know what happened in 1854, eh? The first parliament under the Westminster system, racial parliament in this country. And that's where most of the damage was done to our people. Even the Tūhoe don't realise this, but we believe that is where they met their match. And a lot of their tūturutanga was lost from those years. Why? Because they couldn't handle that situation. From 1854, the situation that what that created right across the country was devastating for everybody. You know, 4 years later, you had Kingitanga get up. You had the land wars, etc., etc., etc. All those sorts of things. And this was after 1841-42. The Musket War had finished. No sooner had the Musket War finished, they were already taking out our seniorities across the Mutu. How were they doing that? They were fraudulating them. They were fraudulating all their lands out from under them. That's what was happening. And they knew that. Take the land away from the seniorities, they had no power. Okay? They already had their plans together to take over the people. And that's where a lot of these kupu come from, Ngai, Māori, all these, the use of those, the continual use of those could see the eventual destruction of all the structures that our iwi had in place. Iwi were like a mothership. See? They were like a mothership. And all of the hapu ne tārewa used to always go backwards and forwards from the mothership. Okay? And and then you had all of the uri, which used to go, the hapu ne tārewa was their mothership. Okay, that's where the uri used to go to, is the hapu ne tārewa. For their strengthening, for their advice, for their development, for their advancements from there. And hence why we've been asking the Kahungunu Rangitane to take their rightful place. Rangitane under the proven, evidenced line of original ancestry descent from Kahu, from Tahumaakaakanuimatua, Māmoe, Hapu, Nui Tonu, Te Tārewa. And of course, Kahungunu, from within the Waitaha Rangi, Hapu ne Tārewa. 10th line, Ure Tārewa of Tahumaakaakanuimatua. And Kahu, although it's from the 5th line, Ure Tārewa, Hapu Nui Tonu, Ure Tārewa of Tahumaakaakanuimatua, it's 2 lines down. So they're the most junior. Rangitane Nui a Rangi are the most junior. They're 2 lines junior down from there. Okay, so although Māmoe and all them are on the same line of descent, and they all have their rightful place in the lines of descent, and Waitaha Rangi are 10th, Rangitane Nui a Rangi are still 2 lines down from there, from that direct line. See, so they're 2 lines down, so they're very, very junior, Rangitane Nui a Rangi. So, aye. And that would be a great way to finish off today. E tatauma. The case against the Crown. We've decided to move forward with that. Even though they're not too forthcoming yet with our settlement, we thought, well, we're not going to wait around for them. Let's get things on the go. And actually, from settlement is where the work begins. We ain't done nothing yet. We've only just begun. Okay, the work's only just begun. And it's been tough, yeah, really, really tough. But once we've got our positioning right in the country, once we've got our status and it's already being respected and acknowledged and recognised in Parliament, as soon as they pass the settlement bill and had it prepared for the, after the final reading, all prepared for the royal assent, which passes legislation in Parliament. What we had there was the admission that Tahumaakaakanuimatua is the preeminence and the prominence, but in very basic terms, in very simple terms, the primary iwi of the region. And it was great to hear that, great to hear all of that, and Kahungunu admitting that they are a part of that line, direct of the 10th line, Uretalewa descent, line of ancestry of Tahumaakaakanuimatua in these lands. And that indeed they are. And that they're only in Uri, and Uri is simply a tribe that is a formal tribe, an official tribe, but hasn't developed into a hapu yet. Why? Because they haven't got an uretalewa. Okay? That would be the same status as the tūhoe. That would also be the same status as the ngāpuhi. And in past times, uretalewa got up to about 5,000 to 10,000 people. Nowadays, they can get up to about 30,000 to 60,000 people, but they're still uri. Okay? They're still uri, some of these groups that haven't got uretalewa. So it doesn't matter. So some of the uri are just as out of whack, if we can put it that way. They're out of whack today. Why? Because they haven't focused on those areas of tribal life. They haven't worried about it. They've just assumed, all these, words like iwi, politically used by the Crown and by the general public and by politicians and politics and governments. They've used all these terms which have slowly ground down the structures of iwi in the country. Okay? And some of those structures are based around what I just shared with you there. The iwi is like the mothership. See? And the hapu uretalewa gets its sustenance, gets its ability to advance, gets its advice from there, and its strength from there. It's always the backbone to, in fact, where the mātua are, where the parental guidance is, where the strength is, where the seniority is within the mothership. That's the iwi. And the uri gets its strength and sustenance from all of them, but initially and in particular from the hapu retalewa. Okay? Okay? So that's its direct mothership, if you like. And, structures like that, the Crown in the past could not battle against those structures. Why? Because they couldn't get to us. They couldn't control us. They couldn't stop us from habitually, moving in those particular circles and structures and tribal formations. Because within those tribal formations is how we survived up to the time. But eventually they ground down. Why? Because we let them. And why? Because things started to get controlled above the ground. A lot more than what they were being allowed to. Specifically from 1816, which is when we had the first sitting of Te Wakaminenga o Te Runanga ko Huiarau, our governance structure there that we're hoping to bring in. Yeah, so we're going to, whilst we're waiting for our settlement to come up, waiting for our deal, we're going to bring in our complaints against the Crown and the fraudulent way in which the TTI was brought into power in this country, the fraudulent manner in which they were able to assume sovereignty in the country, and also the fraudulent manner in which they started to prepare the country to be unlawfully and fraudulently taken under British colonisation and British authority from right throughout in this country. Okay? A part of that was due to the simple fact that was always the aim of Captain Cook. It was always the aim of Busby from 1833, who was hotly protested against, and it was always the game of Hobson, sorry, not Hobson, and that was his game that he brought to the fold, 1839, 1840. But they were our total downfall in the end, because they fraudulently took power in this country and were able to assume power in this country and then establish with the New Zealand Crown an authoritarian dictatorship, which was to absolutely fraudulate and take over with all authority and power in this country. Step by step, they had it all, it was calculated, it was all worked out. And the grand narrative, played the biggest part in that as they continued to establish that from 1839 and continue that on into the 1900s. And then you get the 80 years of what do you call that? There was advancing of the grand narrative over an 80-year period from 1904. I always take it from 1904 because that was a turning point for Kahungunu. Kahungunu are so sucked in from that period. Okay? And there was 80 years of writings that came forward from Pākehā writers who all they did was they continued the overlay of the grand narrative. They continued it on and on and on, right from the land court days between 1862 and 1912 in particular for Wairarapa ki Tararua te Mataua Māori. They continued it on right up for 80 years until Kahungunu had it grounded in their head, even though they are overly over-exaggerated, that they are the major iwi, and they're not. That's the actual reality, is that they're not. Okay, so let's get into that politics, and then we'll have a little chat about the TTI 1840 and our talks so far around that and how we want to get things moving forward and that and the steps we're about to take. We could look at bringing in some assistance from the north. A lot of our allies among the tribes in the north to assist us with some of that. We may also, along the way, lots of other activities might happen, but we need to push this issue forward, and we don't want to leave it laying dormant any longer. Aroha mai e tātauma. And so what we've been thinking is that, well, since we're having to wait some more for our settlement, what we'll do is hook into things now and get everything started. Hopefully it won't affect our settlement, and rightfully it shouldn't do. I mean, this is a whole other take. This has got nothing to do with our settlement. But it does revolve around take that are involved in our amended statement of claim. So perhaps it will. But then again, because we're going to take up a case in an investigation that will possibly take some time, it will mean us pushing for the entirety of our super tribal entity population in the country, of the original inhabitants of this country and the rightful landlords of this country, taking back that power and that ownership in this country once and for all. That's what it's going to end up meaning, this whole deal with the TTI 1840. So that's a biggie. That's a biggie to bring into Kōrero today. Okay, so we're done with the update, and we'll move straight into the political situation for Kahungunu Rangitane, and of course Tahumaakaakanuimatua. Now we've come through. We've beaten them so many times down, and they've been able to still breathe. Come up for air, and treat water, right? Why? Because they're able to get baby. They're using the Crown as their mothership, which is a bit of a hard case when you look at it that way. We've been cracking up at that, and not in a derogatory fashion, but it seems to be that the politics in this space being so that you can use anybody for your mothership today. And it's a hard case that they will utilise the Crown, because most of what they do is non-customary anyway. So for them to use the Crown as their mothership is quite quite amusing, to say the least. But this is the current setup of the politics in this space. This is the current setup. Did I mention the third one for my ex-whānau? The third reason for my ex-whānau, why I won't go back to that fight? Well, the third one's quite easy to get through and talk about. I'll just talk about that briefly before I go on with the political situation with Kahungunu Rangitane. And that's all the personal things that have been done to me. They're unforgivable, most of them. Yeah, I've had to take a lot through my life. And a lot of that has come from the Tūhoe recolonisation of that whānau. They're dumb. They're dumb. The people that actually run their whānau, they're dumb because they're sucked in. They don't realise a lot of the ways that they're using are actually feudal. They're not Tuturu, they're feudal. And that's what their problem is. And, even though, quite easy for one's heart to forgive, and for one to not be angry at them and try to get revenge. I think the Lord's already doing that, getting revenge on them, I think. And that's the thing with my Lord, being a part of Christianity now, and a part of the faith, and growing stronger and stronger every day, and maturing in the faith every day. E tatauma. The thing is that the Lord will always get people like that back, who treat me like that. They might go on for a while thinking that, they're dominating me or beating me or whatever they're doing to me. But if they're doing those things for no reason, if they're doing those things and abusing me, if they're doing those things and they're standing over my very mana and my tapu in the space, then they got big problems as time goes on. And one of those problems is that this is why, and probably it's the main reason I won't return to that whānau, because not only is all that stuff inexcusable, but it's also stuff I do believe they will think should carry on after I return there. Now, I'm not willing to trust them. They're not to be trusted. A, they're mob. B, they're being, trained by Tūhoe to do all these nasty, feudal things to people that they thought they should. And they've been sucked in to believe that was lawful, which is not true. Okay, so that's the third reason that I won't return to that whānau. And I believe they're valid reasons. The major reasons, well, because I want to focus on my whānau, on my kids, on my mokos. I want to focus on all that. For me, the priority of the future is them. I haven't been able to do that over the years. A lot of the troubles that they've caused have stood in the way of me being able to do that. And I feel more, if there's anybody in this whole mess, if I can say so, I feel for everybody in this whole mess, but if there's anybody I feel for the most, it's my kids. Okay, and my mokos, who've been lied to, cheated to, mistreated, maltreated, abused, beaten up, violently threatened, all sorts of things right through this whole thing, right from little bubbers. Yeah, that's how long they've been doing that. And this whānau has been the central instigator of all that stuff. And that's why I won't be returning there. That's the guts of the main reason that I won't return there. Okay? In the final, I think, in conclusion, I think the Lord is having the last say there. And the Lord doesn't believe that it's right for me to return to that whānau. And I'm going to listen to the Lord. That's what the Lord, brings to my heart when I think about that whānau. Okay, they think about unity now, but now they think about it. They didn't think about it when they were abusing my kids. They didn't think about it when they were threatening our people. They didn't think about it when they were treating me with all their feudal ways of doing things. Their rerekuri o te karakia. All of their, all those sorts of things. And the massive judgments and indictments that they put onto my life. And if I can say so, I could have died at least 50 times during a whole space of time from around about, which year should I, easily 2002, from 2002, yeah, let's put it that way, to today. Okay, can I put it that way? My life could have been taken, or I could have died. Being a PTSD too didn't help. But then they didn't know that. Yeah, they didn't know I was PTSD until a couple of years ago. So, maybe that's triggered the change in them, but I'm not too willing to trust them. As gang, as mob, I'm not too willing to trust them. I mean, if they're whānau that are into living like that and doing things like that at all, whether I'm PTSD or not, they shouldn't have been doing that at all. Hey, so as far as I'm concerned, the decision is made. The Lord makes my decisions, let's put it that way. And I will follow the Lord and trust in the Lord. And I understand the Lord has conquered that space. That whānau, if they're feeling hurt because they've been conquered. And they have. They've been conquered by the Lord. And they need to understand that and realise that. And no amount of going for me or trying to get me back into their whānau is going to help them. If anything, that's going to cause a lot more trouble. Okay? Because I'm going to stand strong in there, whether they like it or not. They're going to get beaten up in there. Okay? Because they won't like a lot of what I've got to say in there. And that's going to cause more friction. They won't handle it. Mob won't handle it. Mob won't handle that. They'll need to move aside and move aside real fast. Because that's the way I'm going to be moving. Because we are about to get serious. Once we're settled, the work begins. And you're going to know that Tahumaakaakanuimatua is back once that happens. You understand me? Okay? Same with that whānau. They're going to know that we're back. Okay? All we've done is the initial things. The work really begins once settlement's done. Okay, so we can't wait for that. We can't wait for that. We can't wait to get into gear, get into action and move forward. Okay, just like for the Kahungunu Rangitane, I'm not surprised that they're in discussions, talking around the settlement, etc., because it's going to be a tough time. Once we're settled, they're going to find it really tough working with us. Okay? They'll need to know their place really well. If they're Kahungunu Uri, then Kahungunu Uri it is. Okay? If they're Waitaha Rangi and I'm Taiopuru of that tribe, they got big problems if they don't toe the line. They can't piss around like they've done over the years. They can't be lazy like they've done over the years. They can't make shocking decisions like they've always done over the years. They can't be non-traditional like they've always done over the years. They can't run to the crown to be their new mothership like they've done over the years. They can't do any of that. And just like for Wairarapa Moana is an entity that gets to stay in that land, which is Tahu land, that they're governing over at the moment, and they're managing whoever's running that show. Because I don't like them, they're out of there as soon as we get power. They won't be staying in that entity at all. We will have Tuturu Tahumaakaakanuimatua running everything. Okay? Not idiots that want to assume that late in the piece, just because they know that the balance of power has swung back to the seniorities. Okay? That was because of our hard work, not theirs. Just because they've decided to utilise some tribal affiliation that they've created this new tribe called Ngai Tahu Hapu, which we believe has come from the Carrington text of Kaitahu, well, not Kaitahu, but the Tahu Pōtiki Uri, which is a load of garbage. Okay? No such tribe. No such tribe. Okay? Now, they're in big trouble, those people in that entity, if they don't just ship out of there once we have settlement done with. Now, those particular words too, nothing should hinder the settlement, because settlement is integral for our tribes. We've got to keep perspective on that. Settlement is integral for our tribes. We need settlement here. Kahungunu can't realistically settle without us, without our support, or without anything to do with us. Tahumaakaakanuimatua needs to settle alongside the other tribes. Why? Because these other two tribes are the only other tribes that claim into the space. Our claims cater for everybody, accommodate everybody. All the other tribes within the space are accommodated through Tahumaakaakanuimatua. But then that includes Kahungunu and Rangitane, our teina, as we said in MeaE 2023. Okay? It doesn't matter. Whether they're opposition, at the end of the day, we've still got to cater to them, we've still got to accommodate them, tuturu, in the space. Why? Because that's what's required, tuturu. Okay? That's what MeaE 2023 says. So that's our job, our responsibility is to make sure that advancement is totally theirs, and that everything is kept lawful, everything is kept legal. Okay, so we're looking forward to settlement. We're looking forward to that. And that whānau doesn't know, my ex-whānau, but they would be better off without me in there, to be honest. They'd be better off. Okay? Because I'm going to be challenging their top so much, they're not going to like me. They're not going to like me at all. And they're going to be put in their place all the time. They won't like that. And being mob, and because I'm not mob, they won't like that. Okay? So rather than cause heaps more trouble as a result of that, I'd rather stay out of there. Because then I would also be in a better position with which to help them. And the best position I can help them is to remain in our space, in Tahumaakaakanuimatua space. Because as soon as I get into their space, geez, they're dumb. They're dumb to bring a person like me. I've stood for Tahumaakaakanuimatua the last 27 years, and we've rocked our way to the top. Now, if they think I'm going to stop there, that's where it stops. It never stops. You learn that in this space. In Hapu development, the job never stops. It doesn't matter how to the top you get. It never stops. Okay, the work never stops. In fact, it goes through new phases all the time. And those people from within Kahungunu Rangitane should have already known that. Okay, but we'll leave all the ex-whānau stuff for next week. Okay, I just wanted to share the reasons why they've become a take again. And better off for me to work from our own space because it won't be so hard-hitting. I won't be so tough on them. If I got to go into their space sucks. To be honest, I'm just being blatant. I'm not being mean. I'm not being abusive. I'm not being derogatory. But to be honest, their space sucks. And I'm not going to like it being in there. So I'm going to be pretty mean politically in that space if I got to go back in there. To be honest, too much has happened for me to actually even enjoy being in there. So I'd rather, if anything, they needed help from us or they wanted to be a part of us or anything to do with us, that they came into our space. Because they'd get all due respect there. They won't get me being so forceful politically. They won't get me being so hard on them politically. Okay? And they know for a fact, you change the position of politics. In our position in politics, in our grounds, we tend to be a lot more peaceful there. Because politically, we don't just have the front foot, but we are it. We are politics. We are everything in that space. We are the land is us. We are, the way, and the way is us. So we're pretty calm and peaceful, no matter how political it gets at home. Okay? But if we come into your space and we don't like it, you're going to get some real tough words come out of us. Real hard-hitting sometimes too. To really make those realities hit home. Okay? And this is why, there's two in particular really, that, over these years, especially these last 10 to 15 years, they've been trying their hardest just to talk to me. This is one example, just to talk to me. That's all they've wanted, is just to talk to me, and I've refused and cut them out the whole time. Okay, you know why? Because they're too blow-ass. And that's the situation that they've got in their whānau. They're blow-ass too. And I don't like blow-ass. And if I have to go in there and represent blow-asses, they're going to get it from me. I'm not interested in blow-ass. If you're blow-ass, stay out of my face. Okay, and that's what I'm like politically. If you're a blow-ass, you're out of there. Okay? That's where it's at for me. That's where it's at for me. And I'm just being blatant. I'm just being honest. Okay? Yeah, you know what we're like. We're brutally honest people in Tahumaakaakanuimatua, and I'm just being honest. But in that space, it's so blow-ass, so mob, which is probably not a rightful place for mob. There's a lot of mobsters I know that are not blow-ass. Okay? So to be in a space that's mob and blow-ass, there's got to be something wrong going on in there. Okay? They need to fix that situation up. Okay? And Kahungunu too. Sadly it is, that I must say. But their Kahungunu side is blow-ass too. And they've stayed on the same track right through. Even today they're on the same track and they're still harping on that I should go back to their whānau. No, I shouldn't. No, I shouldn't. It's not the space that I should be in. And so long as my Lord says so to me, that's not the space for me to be in anymore. As a whānau, as a part of that whānau. And I actually want to tend to my kids and my mokos. And that's where my focus is on in these years to come. I don't know if things are going to change at some point. I don't know. But at the moment, that's where things are at. But if you'll blow us, that whānau should already know that I'm not a person to dwell or abide anywhere with you in that space. Do you understand me? Now, I'll always take you as someone that I don't want to be around. I don't want to be near to. Or I don't want to be under. Because as soon as I walk in there, I'm Taina. See? Notice the change in the politics? Secondly, but although I'm Taina, politically I'm not going to sit down and shut up. And I've always been like that in that whānau. Thirdly, you know what? What else changes? Everything's kahungunu, everything's mo. And that stinks. It's going to be the stinkest place for me to ever enter into or be a part of. So I say no. The Lord says no, and so do I. Okay? Okay, but let's look as quickly as possible. I think time's flying, but let's look at that political situation now. Reality is, for Kahungunu Rangitane, is we've beaten them down. They've had to compromise over these last couple of years. The Crown has had to compromise as well. Okay, you realise we got our independence back, so as an independent iwi, again, we can actually settle. As the independent tribe that we are, we've established our primacy, our preeminence and prominence, as, like what I was doing at the end of last year. I established our, what the Crown calls supremacy, okay? But I established ours Tuturu. And the simple fact that Kahungunu Rangitane cannot establish that. All they're doing is boasting. They are boasting. And this is why most of the time I will not give time to discussion with people from those tribes. If I know they're part of the blow-ass part of those tribes, I won't talk to them. Okay? Difference with Hami and them is that you get a lot less of, they're not a part of their particular area of their tribes, which is good. I know a few people like that. You want to know one of the saddest parts? Is that most of them are wahine, the less blowy parts of those tribes. Now, they're the people I like to have things to do with. Why? Because they're the people that we can work with. If you're not a blow-ass, we can work with you. If you are, forget it. Okay? And so, they, having been worn down, this poses the big question now. Which way are they going to go settlement-wise? And this is where we believe that they're at, and while we've got this lull. This lull in the space means big questions for them. Do they just settle for what's exactly theirs, or do they continue on in the space in the same way that they've always claimed, and assume, the primacy of the iwi that they're now claiming that they are? They claimed that within Parliament, around Select Committee and the House of Representatives. They basically claimed that. And we thought, that's a little bit dangerous, although less blowy now, We thought, wow, that's amazing, and to have that sort of recognition and acknowledgement is amazing. But you know what? If at the end of the day, through settlement, they cannot handle the simple fact of the reality and perspective of our status in the settlement, which goes right across the whole of the region, they will need to question hard their stance from them. Okay? The problem is, they can do things like that. See? And this is why I decided that we would discuss this area of things, the political status of things, and the situation politically for us at the moment. Why? Because they've always been able to manipulate not so much the status quo. Not so much the status quo. Because when we came in, we attracted most of the status quo. The problem was that the Crown's always able to manipulate everything above the ground. Remember me bringing that up at the beginning of this kōrero? The Crown's always able to manipulate everything above the ground. And that's where things happen, whereby after they're being babied, they're able to just grab onto all those things above the ground and keep sailing on and continuing to tread water and breathe above the water. Okay, and so that brings me to the simple fact that if they are planning to do that again, they're going to get, basically smacked down again. It's always smacked down. How many times do we have to smack them down? Hey, because we know the state of play. Before we came along, they were able to come up against other tribes and beat them as a result of the other tribes not knowing how things were regulated and manipulated above the ground through the crown and the ability and the power and the authority that gives their tribes. Okay? But because we are a tribe that understands that whole political sphere of influence, there's no way you can utilise that about us, against us. And all we do is come straight for you, right in the core of that situation and the politics you present, and smash you down again. Okay, and this is the thing I want Kahungunu Rangitane to ask themselves. Do they really want to be in that situation again? Because every time we smash you down from here, you're not going to want to get up. Okay? You're not going to want to get up from here. Because we're at the most crucial point in our re-establishments in the land. Not just here in Wairarapa ki TaraRoa to Mataua Maui. We're talking about top of the north to the bottom of the south and right up the west coast up to Punakai ki Tauranga Awa. And Tauranga Awa, okay? So, yeah, be careful if you're going to go that way, because we know that game. We know the state of that politics. It's that sort of politics that enabled Kahungunu and the Crown to settle and manipulate a mandating in 2012 over all our ancestries that we had already told them prior that were ours, Tuturu. Original line ancestry descents, Tuturu, ours. Rightfully, in Tuturu terms, this doesn't matter to Kahungunu Rangitane. It didn't matter then, but I don't know if it matter if it's the same situation now. Hopefully not. But back in 2012, they didn't care about the Tuturu. They said, stuff them. Oh, they're refusing consent. They're refusing to be a part of any consultation or any hui to do with the mandating. Let's just do it anyway. Yeah, we can run them through with the laws of the Crown and the sanctioned powers of the Crown. And anyway, we have regulation of everything above the ground through the Crown authoritarian dictatorship. So let's do it. But see, we understand that sort of politics. If you're going to play that with us, you're going to get smacked down. Okay? And so whilst they're thinking about their settlement at the moment, and, this is how they're able to say to the Crown, oh, we've got 12,000 population in Wairarapa. They don't. They have only 4,000. That's all of the Kahungunu Tuturu that are in the region. Everyone else is Tuturu, Tahumaakaakanuimatua. And then when you put it down to it, everyone is Tahumaakaakanuimatua. Okay? And we've just started bringing up the reo Hapu. Our reo Hapu was the main reo on the ground. Okay, we had reo Matua in operation all the time as well. But the main reo amongst all tribes of the iwi, that includes Kahungunu, that includes Rangitane, that includes Kahu, that includes Tahumatawhaiti, that includes Māmoe, that includes Muaupoko. The reo Hapu on the ground of all those tribes is Tahumaakaakanuimatua. And this is the reo that we've just started to bring out. Only the biblical, mind you. So to learn the rest, you've got to be totally involved, totally allied, totally partnered, working totally closely with Tahumaakaakanuimatua to get the rest of that reo. Okay? And then Tuturu, that reo won't be able to go outside of all our tribes. Okay, and this was the main reo on the ground, not the reo au, It served its purposes. It was a reo that cut across all the barriers, all of the different tribal connections and the distant tribal connections and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The distance between tribes was cut across with reo au. But reo o is different. This is the reo at home. This is the reo of the whānau. This is the reo of the uri. This is the reo of the Tahumaakaakanuimatua that we're talking about. Okay? And as toiou, words like that, as toiou, I bring that reo back into circulation for all of us, particularly of direct descent and original ancestry, direct ancestry descent of Tahumaakaakanuimatua for our use as part of the primary iwi of the motu of Tahumaakaakanuimatua. Totally connected with Te Awa, totally connected with MeaE Hapu, but Tahumaakaakanuimatua in origin. Okay? And the origins of this reo, once you know this reo, you'll know the origins are totally Tahumaakaakanuimatua. And you can see why a lot of the other tribes that branch off from Tahumaakaakanuimatua, why their reo is the way that it is from the Uretārewa, because you can see traces of them in this reo Hapu. Small traces, they're not exactly the same, but you can see where the influence and authority on Uretārewa was that dictated the shape and form and structure of their reo, in particular their reo underground. Now, why is reo Hapu so important? Because reo Hapu is the main reo of communication of every primary iwi. All those iwi I listed at the beginning, from MeaE Hapu to Te Awa Hapu to Tahumaakaakanuimatua Hapu, Nui Tonu Uretārewa, te mea. Each of those tribes had their own reo Hapu. And from their reo Hapu you established grounds and hapori and aukatitai. You established yourself around all those areas of life in general, and you are able to guard every part of those areas. Not just with your life, but with the reo to go with it. Okay? And this reo looked after you. This is the type of reo. This reo kept your interrelations strong and able. And this reo kept all your kōrero matatapu. And this reo also was the main reo of whānau, of toiou and toiou te, all those types of people, and the most senior, and all those types of people and their whānau. This was the sort of reo every day, every night, that was adhered to between members of those groups from within the entire of the super tribal entity of United Tribes and all super tribes, of the preeminent super tribal entities of United Tribes and all super tribes in the country, of which there were only 7. So that means to say every other tribe within that iwi did not have a reo like that, and that's true. If you're not an iwi, you'll find that you don't have a reo Hapu. You have a reo matua, well, you have a reo of your Hapu, but you don't have a reo that's described as a reo Hapu, Nui Tonu Uretārewa. Okay, you don't have that sort of reo. Why? Because it's only the primary preeminent super tribal entities that had that sort of reo. And this is the one we started to share. And it will help you learn some of the reasons why, camouflage it, I mean, reo hapu is already camouflagic. Reo matua can also be camouflagic. And it is. I mean, it seems like just normal, plain reo. I mean, we tend to look too much at the reo as a one universal reo, and that's not true. Our reo is not one universal reo. Let's get out of that thinking. Okay? Our reo is too diverse for that. It can't be one actual language, just like English is. But then again, when you look hard and close at English, it's a reo made up on lots and lots and lots and lots of different influences and cultures and people. Okay, so it's sort of the same, but it's looked upon as one language, whereas ours isn't. Ours isn't one language. Okay, and if reo hapu and reo pōkerekere does not seem like to linguists to be reo that is of a totally new fashion, a new, a totally different vernacular than any other, then reo hapu should wipe all of the opposition to that. Okay, because this sort of reo is totally different to any other reo. Okay, already it is right from the reo matua, even though we don't use dialectual reo usually with reo matua, and people can probably look at reo matua as the most universal, as a part of the same universal Māori reo that they talk about in the motu. There's no such reo really. It's a modern innovation to incorporate us into a one reo thinking and one culture thinking, one racial thinking. And that's not true. We're not a racial people. We're tribal people. We're super tribal. Okay? And that's how our tūpuna thought. They thought on a tribal level, not racial. Not racial, see? So wherever we get the idea that we are Māori people and that's that, I'd like to question that and debate that with people right across the motu, because that's not true. Our people are super tribal. Where we were awa it is. Okay? Where we are Tahumaakaakanuimatua, Tahumaakaakanuimatua it is. Okay? And we were so much more tribal once we got here. Once we got to Te Tiri o Te Moana, all the tribal groupings that started to extend and expand through the motu were it. Okay? And they were so very powerful. And let's not forget, it took 80 years for the Crown to make their move on us. Okay? And another 18 before, the war started. See, so that was 98 years before they actually wanted to have a war with us. And that's how powerful our tribes were. Yeah, I mean, we're a long way from that today, but we're still powerful today. But yeah, we're far from that. We're far from that. Needless to say, we can get there, but we need to wipe out all the ambitiousness of some of the tribes and get our heads together and do this thing properly. Otherwise, we're going to fail. And fail, and fail, and fail, and fail, and not get anywhere. But yeah, that's the situation. And it got like that, though, with Kahungunu Rangitane being so overly over-exaggerated in the space, especially from 1904 and 80 years from there. So that's well into the 70s and 80s at Tautoma, where they were totally colonised by the grand narrative and the thinking that, firstly, that everyone was kahungunu, and then we got recolonised again by the return of the Rangitane Nui a Rangi, and everyone thinking, oh, they were kahungunu Rangitane. And now we've got the story straight. Yeah. And we came in and said, no. Everyone's not either of you. Everyone is Tahumaakaakanuimatua. And we're so wrapped right now. Because right now, and it has to be tough for Kahungunu right now. So they've got some hard decisions to make. But we're hoping that they keep it on the straight and narrow, eh? If they keep it on the straight and narrow, nothing can go wrong. Okay? They continue to follow their nose. You know, with leaders like Hami, they're really going places, we believe. Yeah, we believe that's the right person to be guiding them forward. But taking so long, I don't believe they need to take so long. Because it just shows for us how much they're overthinking in the space. Because a lot of the take that they're considering are not ones that you should overthink. See? So that's why we moan about things like that when Kahungunu takes so long. They should get a move on. Do the right thing. That's the thing with Tuturu politics or front foot politics. Tuturu politics and front foot politics is about doing the right thing first and making that the priority, see? And that's why we're so hard on things like that. We're so hard on things like that. Why? Because all too often it's not what's done. Everyone purses around, mucks around. No, we're going to get straight to the point and straight down to business. That's what's going to happen once we're settled. Okay, we're going to have all hands on deck and we're going to be doing the job that's required. And we're going to do it from start to finish. And we're going to accomplish everything that we need to accomplish. Okay, if we fail at some things, we're going to try again and try again and try again. But if I know and understand the wisdom and the ability, the capabilities of Tahumaakaakanuimatua, when we fail small. Okay, and when we succeed, we succeed big. And that's real big. And that's how we operate. Okay, if we do fail anywhere, we're pretty sure, we're pretty confident we can get on top of that. Okay, and so 80 years into the colonising deal of the grand narrative, 80 years into it, all those authors that followed Percy Smith and all those writers best, all those people that wrote through those times, the early mid to late 1800s, right through from 1904 into the 70s and 80s, got sucked in. Yeah, everyone got colonised by the grand narrative. Then hello, 10 or 20 years later, in comes the famous five. The famous five. All the seniors returned to the country. Okay? All the seniors returned to the country. And we've been having our say for quite some time now. I'm just so happy we're coming to the end of an episode in our re-establishment in the country and the re-establishment of MeaE and Te Awa Hapu. And we're starting to work through everything in terms that we can now do that on level terms. We can now do that on acceptable terms. And we can do that within conditions that are suitable for everybody. Okay? Kahungunu and Rangitane are not going to miss out ever on what is theirs. Okay? Okay? The whole of the problem within the manipulation of everything above the ground by the Crown dictatorship has meant that we could have missed out on most of what was ours. See, that's what the problem was. And that's how hurt we've been right through. And imagine if you were the most senior and most of your taonga were being ripped off by everybody else. You'd be pretty hurt. And you'd be pretty hurt if they knew that. And they knew your stance and they didn't give a shit. Hey, you'd be pretty hurt. You'd be pretty hurt at that. And you'd be pretty hurt if they kept trampling all over you right over that time. Okay, and that's how it's been for us. Have we handled it? No. But we did manage everything as best we could. We did something about it as best we could. And that's the way it's been. Okay, so that's just a little bit about where we're at And so we believe, hopefully, if the Kahungunu are, they just have to get used to the simple fact that the traditional is structured the way it is, because that's the way it is. And you can't argue with that. That's the thing with front foot politics that goes with it. You can't argue with that either. What you've got to do is make sure that you're doing what's right first. And that's the priority. And that's the way you take things. Okay, so we're hoping, even though they might be overthinking some of them, that they come back to the reality of the situation. And the reality is they really just have to accept the customary, the traditional, and move with that. Because they keep trying to upset that, and they're going to end up getting smacked down again, smacked down again, smacked down again. We're sick of that. We're sick of that. And I'm sure the Lord, when the Lord wanted us to work in the space in that way and supported our work in the space in that way, that there was a limited time and a limit to what we could do over that. I didn't mean to chuckle over that time, but it sort of, was easy to gauge when we had to pull back, and pull back we did, because we felt the hand of the Lord pulling us back to hold things up. And that was around about the time I ended up in the Christian faith, because things were getting too hotted up in there, and I was going, I believe, in a direction that I shouldn't have gone. And I mean, because we're not afraid to get our hands dirty. We're not afraid to fight the good fight. Okay? And so, if that's the way it gets, that's the way it gets. And this is the space to do that. And but the thing is, I think the other tribes, at the end of the day, when it comes to the crunch, they know the deal. They know the deal. As soon as they stuff it up, it's all gone for them. Okay? And we know that that's what the old people have told them. We've never been afraid to take it there. So, and in fact, we've been hoping it did go there, but it wouldn't. You know why? Too many allies on our side, which would just obliterate Kahungunu. Kahungunu would get obliterated. Not only that, but their old people would stamp down on everything Kahungunu, and they would give up this whole deal. And we know that. We know that. Now, all their excuses aside, really what they've been trying to do is manipulate everything alongside the Crown. That's been their way of doing politics right through. That's how they've got what they've wanted. It's just through the Crown ability to manipulate the space and everything above the ground. That's, what they get after getting babied. Oh, do you want this, what we're doing at the moment, to manipulate the space above the ground? Will you need any help there? Oh, yes, please. Yes, please, mummy. But without sounding derogatory or belittling or anything like that. Because that's exactly what they're doing. That's the reality. If we pull all this stuff into perspective, that's the reality, okay? Okay, and so, that brings us for today, TeTiriti 1840. Now, like I was saying, they like to manipulate population, etc., etc., etc. That ability to manipulate things above the ground helps them to do things without following the Tutura. See how they operate politically? Because they can get that sort of power through the Crown above the ground, they utilise that. But we're too wide awake to all of that. I just want to really, in this space and time of Kōrero, to really make that clear to Kahungunu, that the reason why we've been beating them all the time, beating them down, is because their sort of politics is not easy. Not hard for us to latch on to and smack them down with. That does not work with us. Okay, and they're always going to get beaten. So they may as well be sensible and follow Hami's lead. And I think his lead is right. I was very happy with our talks last year. They started off a bit feisty, the Kahungunu side. They were a little bit rebellious to start off with, but they settled down once they realised actually we were there to settle. We weren't there to fight against settlement. And so they got a bit of a shock there, and then things started to calm down quite a bit. And we were happy at the end of the day. It was just having to go back to the Crown. We weren't happy with that. But coming back into settlement is always going to be a really positive move for us. And that we've always wanted that. We've always wanted settlement. We just have not wanted the conditions that they had over us. So we had to take control of the space. One way to do that, use the tūturutanga that we have and all the power that we have under that lawful way of operation, and utilise that power. And that's what we did through the Whakatapu and also with the investigation, which brings me to the last of our kaupapa today, the TTI 1840. You know, we have to say that, in fact, I think most of us are for, and with the board that I'm using at the moment through National Office, most of us are all for the investigation actually starting this off. We would love to bring the Crown up on charge. And why not? Why not? I mean, they should answer to this sort of thing. They've been fraudulent. They've utilised the treaty to overpower the whole of the motu. I mean, the ramifications are up to the trillions and costs. You know, that's including all the lives that they've affected, the lives that have been lost in the process, you know, and all of the money and land and everything, the resources that have been exploited and wasted right through from 1840 right up to the day. Now that's trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars that they owe us. And we're going to be asking for every cent of that at the finish of this case. We're going to be asking for the Crown to stand down in this case, and the whole of the authoritarian dictatorship to be taken down. And we're also going to be asking for Westminster to be brought back in. Okay? And of course that'll bring back in the Confederation of Chiefs, which is empowered by customary law. Even if, you know, modern law and that order doesn't want to support that or utilise its law, what makes the Confederation of Chiefs and the Declaration so legal is actually the application of custom law into that. See? So it's legal whether people like it or not. It's part of the actual constitution made up of several documents and customs of the country, believe it or not. Okay, so you can't stop that, and you can't stop the power of the Confederation of Chiefs in the process. Along with that comes kohuiarau. Te wakaminenga o te runanga kohuiarau, we would look to establish that. And also the power of the Declaration, the power of the TTI 1840 we will keep, but we will have to add this particular area of things. Not just contra preferentum, which is already in process, but the actual fact that a power and sovereignty in this country was assumed via fraudulent means. Okay, that puts a whole different light on whether this New Zealand Crown should remain representatives of the allied partner that the TRT pertains to, which is the Crown of Westminster. Why they didn't hold on to power, we don't know. We don't understand that part. But that was not consulted with our people. The super tribes were not consulted, and I dare say, I guarantee you they kicked up right across the country at that. But, you know, like with most things that the Crown does when they run a dictatorship, an authoritarian dictatorship, you get no say in what they decide. And that's it. You just got to handle it. Okay, so those are the recommendations that once we get them into court and answerable to these indictments via the investigation, we also waited up on Moana, we may draw them into that investigation as well. Okay, because what they're doing is illegal. They've just settled on that land, and that's all totally illegal. If they've used Ngai Tahu Hapu, they're still illegal because that Hapu does not exist. And if that's a Hapu name that comes out of the Carrington text of the Tahu Pōtiki Uri of the South Island, they've just been sucked in. Because that Carrington text is a load of rubbish. Okay? Most of the ancestries in that Carrington text are all out of whack. Okay? And so they should do their homework before they do things like that. Those people running Wairarapa Moana. So, but, yeah, the Crown would need to be answerable to this case. And that's where we're going to start off, right there. And we'll keep bringing things to light as they come to hand. And also, with settlements e tatauma, hopefully, you know, within any time as possible, that the deal will be made, the Crown will get in touch, we'll have those talks, complete those, and go straight into the settlement deal, and we'll let you know exactly when that is. All prayers e tatauma, kia koe e te matua, atua matua kaharawa, te ringarawa, te ia, we atua. All our prayers go all out to the continued recovery and rebuild of all those affected by Cyclone Gabriel. And also the earthquakes across the world there over at Turkey and the war in Ukraine. E tātou te tokotoru tapu. Te tokotoru, ko koutou tonu anō tēnā te tokotoru tapu. Me ki. Ki a koe tonu. E tō tātou mātau atua matua kurau tūtonu. We exalt you continually, we praise you and thank you continually for everything that you're doing in our lives, and ask of you that you continue to bring the recovery forward and the rebuild forward for all those affected in those areas, and all our prayers go all out for all of them in Jesus' name. Amen. Ka piti hono ka tātai hono. Ko rātau mātonu anō tērā, rātau kua wehe atu, rātau kua wehe noa atu ki tua o te ārai o te mate. Ka piti hono ka tātai hono, ko tātau mātonu anō tēnei tātau ka huri ke mai nei ki roto ki ngā kōrero a Tahumaakaakanuimatua, ki ngā WhakataungaKereeme, ki Wairarapa ki Tararua o te matau a Nawe, rua mano, rua takau mātoru, ai te mihi atu. Kai te mihi atu, tēnā rā koutou, tēnā rā tātou, tēnā rā tātou, tēnā rā tātou, kātua toa, mauri ora. Kahuri.